Let's get started. Um, Thank you so much, everyone. Welcome to Maddox Digital and Customer Success Summit. You're currently watching Building Digital CX Maturity, the Four Pillars of Digital CX. I'm really excited to introduce our speaker. And as I introduce them, I'm going to have them answer our icebreaker question. So first off, everyone please welcome Alex Turkovich, who is the Senior Director of Customer Experience at Belfry. And to kick things off, I have to ask you, what is your biggest digital addiction? Sorry if that's a little bit too real.
Thanks, Jack. I appreciate it. And nice to see everybody joining. Almost 50 of you now, which is cool. See some familiar faces. So nice to see you. My digital addiction, look, I am almost hoping this TikTok ban thing happens because it is way too much of a time suck for me. It is admittedly, I think a lot of us have probably fallen victim to the TikTok shop a few too many times, and I would include myself in that category. And I see Dan Luke as well. So TikTok, man, it needs to go away. Honestly,
Yeah, they arguably do their job too well.
yeah, yeah, they really do. They really do.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. All right, without further ado, happy to pass it over to you to kick things off.
Great. I'll grab the screen share. Hope everybody's doing well. Nice to see you. I'm gonna make sure I'm sharing the right thing, which should look something like that. All right. And I see a lot more people joining. So welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Alex Turgovich. I lead CX at Belfry Software. Been there since November-ish of last year. Also host the Digital CS podcast. If you're not already a listener, I would love to have you as a listener. You can follow the QR code on the screen. See, I got to do promotion like at every turn here. Anyway, I know I see a lot of familiar faces in the attendees list, so it's nice to see you guys and appreciate you joining today. Today, I'm going to talk about something I've talked a little bit about, actually quite a bit about on the podcast itself. Also at a couple of conferences here and there, but we're going to talk through the four pillars of digital customer success. The goal for today is really to help build a strong foundation upon which a digital program can operate, because ultimately we have lots of dreams and aspirations in terms of what we want to build. But a lot of times those don't align with the reality of the foundation upon which they sit. And so that's essentially what we want to dig into today. Just a quick bit about me. I live in the Austin area. We've been here 17 years now, enough to see it change. If anybody else is in the Austin area, would love to see that in the chat as well, or just general, tell us where you're at. But yeah, been here 17 years, married 16 of those years. I do run the occasional half marathon. Bo Kim is here from Austin too. Nice to see you. I spent a lot of time in learning development, spent a lot of time in professional services as well, been really focused on customer success and most recently broader customer experience, and specifically focused on automations and digitization and data cleanliness and all that kind of good stuff. And like I said, my TikTok addiction is strong, but also my vinyl record collection is strong. So I'm balancing the digital with the analog, so to speak. So that's a bit about me. Today, without further ado, let's dive right in here because that's why you came. A lot of times, in the course of running the Digital CX podcast for almost 2 years now, a lot of folks approach me with just a fundamental question of like, where do I start in digital and what do I need to get started and all that kind of stuff, right? It's a common question. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are practitioners too. And if you're a digital practitioner, you've probably answered this question as well. And it can be a little bit hard to kind of know or tell somebody where to start. But fundamentally, the goal for you as a digital practitioner or a CS leader or a CX leader or whatever type of persona you really fall into that's customer facing, the goal here really is to increase what I like to call digital maturity or digital CS maturity, um, because building your program out and your maturity against what I'll show you today, which is the foundational pillars, is the foundational building blocks that you can do to really help develop your program and be what you want it to be, to achieve those aspirations that you have for your customer experience, along with all the side ancillary benefits that we talk about quite a bit around reducing your cost to serve your customers, and really building those efficiencies out, making sure that your CSMs have all the tools and data and insights that they need to serve their customers. But ultimately, and perhaps more importantly, I think we live in a day and age where your customers just expect to be served digitally. Customers expect you to have a chatbot. Customers kind of expect you to have some semblance of digital engagement, because that has by far become the norm. And honestly, in B2B, we've been behind the 8 ball on this, because B2C has been doing this stuff forever. So in a little way, in some ways, we're playing catch up here, right? Um, but what I have essentially come to the conclusion, through my years and working in digital, and talking with a lot of folks on the podcast about digital, I've come to the conclusion that really this stuff rests on what I like to call these 4 foundational pillars of digital CS, where without these pillars in place, you're going to have a really, really hard time executing on some of those aspirational goals that you have for your customer experience. And so today we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into each one of these pillars, starting with customer journey, data and data hygiene, automations and technology and content, just to kind of set the stage for you a little bit. And one of the things that you will get access to at the end of this presentation is access to a maturity assessment. So you'll be able to go through your own or go through an assessment of your own program against these 4 foundational pillars, just to see where you stack up, and maybe to highlight some of your opportunities as you go forward. There is a little bit of a method to the madness here, and an order of priority, because ultimately, in my humble opinion, you got to start with your journey, and it doesn't need to be fully baked. It doesn't need to be super detailed, but you got to generally know what your happy path is for your customers. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Then you need that data quality and that data to back up your customer journey, and to really be able to tell, when a customer is in a certain journey and what they're doing along that customer journey, followed by 2 that kind of go hand in hand, right? Your automations, technology, and then content, which is supremely overlooked sometimes. But it really falls into those 4 pillars in this order of operations. And as I alluded to earlier, there is a layer deeper here, right? We've got these 4 pillars that are organized around building digital maturity, but then underneath those 4 pillars, there are a bunch of subcategories. No need to screenshot or take a quick picture. You can if you want to, but this is all that digital maturity assessment that I alluded to earlier. You'll have access to that at the end, where you can go through and rate yourself on all of these 18 subcategories as well. But just know that there's a lot that goes into each one of these 4 pillars. So let's start at pillar 1, customer journey. What I'd like you to do in the chat is quickly rate yourself and your organization on a scale of 1 to 5. How would you rate your organization's maturity in customer journey? Have you documented it? To what detail have you documented? How do you feel about it? Do you feel like you have, really gone into the weeds and into the detail? Or is it kind of lackluster? I see them starting to come in. You've got 1, 2.5, 3, 2 to 3. Okay, so we're roughly, using my data analysis powers, we're averaging a 2.5, maybe right around the middle. maybe closer to 3 average. Okay, that's super helpful. So yeah, we've probably for the most part done some semblance of customer journey mapping, right? One of the things that I am keenly interested in as again, I'll call myself a digital practitioner, is this notion of not just mapping human behaviors against a customer journey, but also mapping those digital engagement points among or along the customer journey, right? So examples include, email, onboarding portal, landing pages, really anywhere where you're engaging your customer in a digital with a digital methodology versus, human mouth words, as I like to call them. I think those are super, super important to map out along your customer journey. And if you haven't already done so, I think it's worth doing because clearly mapped out engagement points help you really to design a strong program and help you to analyze what the needs are that you, or what inputs you will need to be able to build those things into your program. Now, I like to think about digital engagement points using these 3 general categories or calendars, if you will. The first is that company calendar. So I like to think about it in terms of what is your company offering to your customers as points of engagement, conferences, webinars, office hours, training sessions, those things that live on the company calendar where you can do a bit of PR digitally to your customers. Things like sending automated messages from your CSM about certain things coming up, or announcements about upcoming conferences and those kinds of things. So that lives on a separate calendar, obviously, from the customer lifecycle calendar, because your customers will enter this customer journey at different points. So you've got these cohorts of customers entering at different times. And so your customer lifecycle events are going to look very different. They're all going to be, largely time or trigger based. So time based is, when they started, when their renewal date is. Hopefully, when they finished onboarding, right? You have these moments in time that you can track against and you can automate certain digital events against. And then you also have your triggered events. So think of things like, your product telemetry. What's your product telling you about their adoption? What's your health score telling you? What is support ticket volume telling you about how the customer is doing in general? And what automations can you build on the back of that to help customers if either they get themselves in trouble or they're doing something that you want to reward? I love rewarding customers via these kinds of digital engagements. And then lastly, you want to think about things from a user flow as well. So our new users joining a company that need to be onboarded. Are there specific users that have usage milestones or have users engaged with specific content, either in your LMS or your knowledge base and whatnot? So putting all these things together into a cohesive customer journey is super important, and weaving in those digital motions and human interaction points, I think is very important, and also making sure that your digital motions also have a path to a human and vice versa, right? So it's a bit on customer journey. We're going to kind of fly through some of these a little bit just for time constraints, but wanted to make sure I spent a little bit of time on that. Now, pillar 2 is all about data and data quality. Again, rating a 1 to 5. How would you rate your organization's data maturity? I guarantee you these scores are going to be lower. I guarantee you. Every time I do this, I see a lot of 1s. I see a lot of 2s. I see, okay, there's a 3 in there. Way to go, Allison. Eric. Some 3s, lots of 1s. Yep, totally to be expected. Barely a 2. Okay. Yeah, so we're a lot lower here. Why is that? Look, data is all over the place, right? Customer data is one of the toughest nuts to crack when it comes to building out, digital maturity, but it is probably one of the most critical. So, and this is where a lot of people get really, really tripped up. I I don't know if I really need to go into the details about why data matters. I think you all know why data matters, but fundamentally speaking, I think if you want to go build a digital strategy and a digital motion, you need to be able to pull the insights in order to power that digital motion, and also then on the back end be able to measure, improvements against your digital motion. But ultimately, data is what powers all of this stuff. And so I think about data in a couple of different buckets. And this is actually borrowing from a presentation that Dan Ennis and I did last year, um, on the same topic. But we're talking about the combination of things like product telemetry, where you're pulling information out of your product, engagement metrics, where you're looking at how your customers are engaging with you, um, and then contextual. A lot of us don't really look and see what's actually happening with this customer. Are they in the middle of an acquisition? Are they in the news somehow? Like, what's happening contextually? And then pulling all of that together into some predictive model is like what good looks like, right? But you're probably on here with a one in the chat being like, well, I don't, we're on-prem. I've never seen, any kind of telemetry data for my product. Um, and I've been in those shoes before, very much so in those shoes. And so, in those instances, we had to get creative with our data. We had to get really creative with what data we pulled from where. So I'll give you a couple examples because I like to leave you with tactical stuff. We would look at our community because we did have a community. We'd see which users specifically were engaging with certain questions, which ones were answering questions. We'd look to see, how often, um, customers were engaging with the community. We did the same thing for our learning management system to see how engaged our customers were with our, learning modules and those kinds of things. And so taking those engagement metrics from the platforms around us that we did have visibility to helped us to then, you know, partially replace some of the kind of signs of life that we would have otherwise gotten from the product. But yeah, if you're in that same boat, I definitely hear you. It's tough sometimes to gather all of that data into one place, and then be able to action it via automation, which we'll get to in a second here. But ultimately, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Ultimately, what I think a lot of us need to be focused on, and the thing that is going to make the biggest impact in your in your data practices is that hygiene. You gotta take the effort to go clean data. And my approach to this has always been: these are the things I want to do. These are the inputs that I need, and these are the gaps in those inputs that I need to go solve for. And so it makes the data problem into, from this massive behemoth of an issue into bite-sized chunks that I can then go after. A simple example would be, you know, my customer I know my customer names live in one field instead of a first and last name field. Okay, I'm going to do a project to separate those. That's a simple example. But like, I'm missing email addresses. Okay, you can go on a campaign to build that email list up. A lot of this can be done with human efforts, but a lot of it can also be done via automation, and making sure that you're using the tools around you to fill in the data gaps that you do have, making sure that you use the integrations around you to fill in the data gaps that you do have as well. So focus on data. That's a huge part. And again, when you look at those four pillars and orders of operations, you got to have your customer journey unlock, or at least somewhat defined. You got to have the data to support it. And from there, we're going to go on into automation and technology. And a quick another poll, 1 to 5. How would you rate your organization's ability to automate? Can you run automations with the systems that you have? 2 working on 4. So Amy's skipping 3. That's cool. 4, 4, 4, 3.5. Okay. Scores here are a lot higher. That does not surprise me at all because there's a lot of tools out there that can help us with automation. Matic being one of them, but most of your CRMs have automation capabilities. Most of your CSPs, if you have one, have automation capabilities. If you don't have either, there's Zapier, there's make.com. There's all kinds of tools where you can automate for next to or no money even. So it doesn't surprise me that the scores here are higher. In general, automations are, a part of our daily life these days. I mean, you may be running super simple automations between your inbox and your ticketing system, for instance, or things like that. Most of us have some semblance of automation in place, even in your inbox. If you're sorting emails to certain places, guess what? You're automating. But ultimately, there are opportunities left and right to automate. And there's some typical things that you look at in terms of your process, your product, communications that you're sending out on a regular basis, where there is opportunity for you to step in and really start to think about, okay, where do you want to automate? One of the things that there's really a couple of main things that I want to hit on here. The first is, when I'm looking for places to automate, I'm always looking for places where humans are repeating themselves over and over and over again. I think that one, that kind of goes without saying. Wherever your humans are doing something repetitive is always an opportunity for you to step in and at least help with the automation to remove some or all of that repetitive activity so that your humans can then focus on value driving activities. But the flip side of the coin there is, I'm always looking at, if I'm looking to build an automation and it isn't currently being done on a repeated basis, I'm actually going to do it manually first. And I know that seems counterintuitive, and I'd be curious to see if a lot of you have the same opinion here. But if I want to go automate a certain action, I want my humans to do it first. I want to do it myself first as the automator, and maybe for a prolonged period of time. Like, let me in there for a month or two so that you can then be the point of failure, so that you're not automating the point of failure. You always want to test this stuff first by doing it manually before you go in and start automating stuff, because I guarantee you're going to automate it wrong, and then you're going to have to just redo the automation. So it's a total waste of time. So take that extra time and learn about the automation and learn about the intricacies of what you want to go build before you do it. I'm glad to see a lot of you agreeing. So thank you. That's awesome. Okay. Jumping ahead rather quickly here, but I want to focus a little bit on content as being the last pillar here. Quick show of hands, so to speak, or 1 through 5s. How would you rate your organization's content maturity? Do you have a lot of content? Do you have a variety of content? Do you not have any content? Do you have video? 2s, 3s, 4, 5. Okay. Again, right down the middle there. Cool. Super helpful. Super helpful. Okay. So yeah, there, a lot of you, no 5s in here, no 1s. So that's cool. A lot of you are kind of right down the middle, right? You probably have a good collection of maybe baseline content. You probably have some articles. You probably have some Loom videos maybe, or something like that. So a good collection of things that you can draw upon. Maybe Amy says she has too much content. Amy, I hear you on that. That can be a huge problem. And especially if you have too much outdated content as well, right? Huge problem. Absolutely. So look, and this brings me to the primary point here. In hosting the Digital CX podcast for, did you like that plug? In hosting the podcast for the last 2 years or so, one of the things that I ask a lot of my guests is what is their definition of digital CS? And then at some point, I don't know, last year, I put all of those definitions into ChatGPT actually, and I said, "Hey, can you create one unified kind of definition?" And it did an okay job. But I guess my point is one of the common themes in all everybody's definition of digital CS is just getting the right content to the right person at the right time in the right place. And I couldn't agree more because the content piece, even though a lot of times it's the first thing that people say, is the last thing that people kind of pay attention to in terms of a priority, right? We're always trying to leverage content from different places. The problem with that is a lot of times we get ourselves kind of wrapped around the axle because there's so much different content that looks different. The branding is different. The look and feel is different. There's, it gets to be a little bit overwhelming as well. And so, you know, but, fundamentally speaking, let's look at Bill Gates. Yeah, there's a couple Bill Gates quotes in here, but content is king is one of his more famous ones and the ones that learning nerds really subscribe to. But really, content is what you need to really focus on to have a higher quality of digital engagement, and not just another boring email, right? So, you've spent some time looking at your customer journey. You've spent some time defining what moments you want to create and what experiences you want to create. You've collected the data that you need to be able to automate this stuff. So what content do you really need to pull together? One of the things that I have had really great success with is, and this kind of gets into staffing a little bit, to be honest, but I've had really good success with this hybrid model where you are leveraging in-house content, but it's being curated by somebody, right? So there's kind of two extremes here. One is you're focused solely on just collecting as much in-house content from, you know, uh, a variety of different people, or you have like a whole team dedicated to like building in-house content, which honestly is just expensive and time consuming versus a curated approach where you're just taking random bits of things that don't really fit together and you're trying to put them together in some semblance of a cohesive experience. And that's always really really hard to do, because product briefs are not created, product briefs and like polished marketing materials are not created equal, right? And you can tell when those things are just band-aided together. So what I love looking at is a person or a small group who can take the content that's around them, build additional content, and kind of incorporate those things into a cohesive experience, where you have this singular identity. You want to think about your content in terms of branding, and yes, your company branding, but also do you want to brand it as a learning experience, so to speak, which I'm a huge fan of. But essentially, by doing so, you're taking the best bits of content from around the company or the organization. You're identifying where the gaps are in that content, and then you're still able to create the things that fill that gap. Lisa Hayes says we are hybrid now. It's working much better than the silos. Couldn't agree with you more. So if you're thinking about what your content strategy, should look like, especially from a staffing and a who's who perspective, think about that. So this is just a kind of a random hodgepodge of like what a customer's curated content flow might look like based on maybe an onboarding flow, right? So week one, they might get an in-app and an in-app notification or something, or an in-app flow with some emails associated with it. Week two, you might expose some more in-depth technical documentation. You might have an e-learning course that you want them to go through week three. You might introduce them to the community week four. I mean, everybody's flow is going to look completely different. But again, this goes back to your customer journey and at what point does it make sense based on your customers and your customer personas? At what point do you want to drop these things? and ideally build that digital journey around what documentation do you have, what content do you have, and really when do you want to drop it. Um, the one tip I always give at this point is you really need to use these opportunities, especially as your customers are getting onboarded, to teach them how to fish. Don't send them the article, send them the link to the article. Don't send them the course, send them the link to the course or the instructions how to get into the course. Because the more that you're training your users to leverage your self-service content that you do have published out there, the better off you'll be down the road in terms of ticket deflection and support questions and those kinds of things as well. So we tie these four pillars in together, what I like to call the digital CS sweet spot, which exists right in the center of all those four pillars. As I promised you towards the end, I do want to give you access to a digital CX maturity model assessment. So I'll leave this up here for a while so you can scan the QR code, go through the assessment. I promise I won't bug you once you do. But ideally, it would be it's a good opportunity for you to kind of assess your own organization's maturity, much like you did in the chat, but maybe on a level deeper where you can really identify, okay, these are some things that I want to focus on, or these are some, specific areas of opportunity for the organization, or these are areas where we're doing really well and we don't need to spend a lot of time on. So I'll leave this up for a bit, but I would love to, I know we flew through that presentation. I'd love to open it up to a few questions if they've been submitted and answer those for you.
Yeah, it looks like we do have some questions in the chat. So I think most recently we have, do you see funneling everyone to kind of the self-service content as an additional
Mhm.
hurdle to adoption?
As an additional hurdle to adoption. Um, I think that's a loaded question a little bit, and I think it depends comes in a little bit, but ultimately, I don't actually see it as a hurdle because the more that you can expose your self-serve content and your self-service kind of assets, the better in terms of long-term longevity. Oh, you reframed the question more around putting up tasks before they get to the content. Oh, I got you. Okay. So yeah, I kind of mentioned, instead of just, sending them the document, sending them the link to the document and those kinds of things. I think you have to be extremely intentional about your customer experience when it comes to your self-service portals as well. In a perfect world, maybe your organization has made the decision to have your self-serve content out in the wild, right? So it's not hidden behind a login, it's not hidden anywhere. It's literally a link to the help center, and you can go and consume the knowledge as much as possible. That isn't always the case. So obviously a lot of times we need to hide those things behind some kind of login and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's where a strong onboarding experience needs to kind of coincide with those actions, and making sure that if there's an opportunity to, for example, establish a single sign-on relationship between your product and whatever platform it is that houses your knowledge-based content or your LMS or whatnot. Ideally, your customers would have a single sign-on into all of that stuff. Again, isn't always the case, but that's where I guess I would answer the question is that's part of that customer journey that you need to look through. That's like part of the holistic customer journey of where are the friction points? And that only comes from like building stuff, testing it, breaking it, and redoing it. So
Let's see, we've got a bunch of other questions here. Another one would be, How do you deal with subjective information? Say you have customers with internal struggles, so their engagement is not a direct reflection with your product. How do you deal with that from a data perspective?
I don't know if I fully understand that question.
I think
Uh,
if you submitted this, feel free to add additional detail. It sounds to me like it's almost how do you account for just like factors outside of your control? Like maybe the adoption is low because, you know,
yeah.
they're going through some kind of internal restructuring.
Hmm. Yeah. W- I I have struggled with this exact thing several times, and um, one of the things that has helped me the most is to create as many opportunities for customers to or for you to listen to customers as possible. Um, I think there are things that happen within our customers that we just have zero idea about. And I'll give you a couple examples for some interesting ways of solving for it. One thing I've done in the past is used Google News, for instance, and a Google News feed trained on my specific customer to feed into like a Slack channel or something like that. I do this today via Google News feed to Zapier to Slack. And for a couple, for my largest customers, I'm looking for news articles or anything that's out there that hits Google about the customer to feed into that Slack channel, because sometimes I'm telling my customer contacts about stuff that's happening in their company. Um, Not always, right? But I think my point is any way that you can, any way that you can create an opportunity for gathering that input from your customer is important. So if you have a large customer and you have a one-on-one, relationship with a CSM, that gets a little bit easier because ideally you have regular touch points with that customer. You can kind of ask them for what's going on. Are there any mergers or acquisitions happening? But a lot of times you don't. And so my recommendation would be to use, tools that we are all aware of, use surveys and and maybe do it in ways that are somewhat unique. Ask questions in unique ways, like, you know, anything changed in your business? If you're doing an NPS survey, you might as well tack a question on to the end of it that says, have there been any major changes in your business? Have there been any additional users? Have there been any additional stakeholders that you want to tell us about? Like those kinds of opportunities that you can create either in app or in a survey or whatnot, hopefully help with you building that contextual knowledge of your customers.
I think this might be a follow-on to part of your response. Can you elaborate on more opportunities to listen to customers? What are the best sources of intent data from your experience?
Intent data. Uh, Look, the best source of intent data is the intent data that works, and that sounds like a dismissal of your question, but it's actually kind of serious. So uh, let's look at health score, for example. What I think is very important to do is to do regression testing on whatever data that you have on your customer, and specifically regression testing against your churned accounts. If you're looking at your churned accounts and that churned account was never flagged in your health score as being in danger, then your health score isn't quite right. But also among your churned accounts, if there was a consistent indicator that showed you that something might be up with the customer, that is an ideal place for you to build some telemetry around and build some insights around, right? And so there isn't one ideal place because all of you are unique, special butterflies, right? And it's going to be different for all of you. But I think um, it behooves all of us to dig into the data a little bit more, especially around your churned customers, because that's where you're going to find your predictors. That's where you're going to find things that predict churn in other customers that haven't quite hit whatever that magic uh, indicator is. Sentiment analysis. Yeah, totally. Sentiment analysis is hard. I don't know if you've cracked that nut yet, but that's hard.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let's see. We have a couple questions from the Q&A widget as well. So let me see here. How do you deal with Oh, I'm sorry, I answered that one already. Or you answered that one. We have another one, which
mhm.
is, can you provide examples of successful automations that have significantly improved customer engagement?
Um, sure. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a couple of tactical things, and I'll give you these with the caveat of um, what works for me doesn't always work. You know, what will work for me in my environment might not work for you. Um, I think we are all very in tune with things like pre-renewal flows, right? So an example might be, okay, 90 days before renewal, you start kind of like this email thread and all that kind of stuff. Um, and start the conversation about the renewal. I'm sure the majority of you have something like that in place. The thing that goes back to kind of what we were talking about earlier that I've focused on here is when to interject the human into that flow as well. Because it's one thing to send a thread of, a thread of emails, but is there a customer meeting that you want to throw in? When do you interrupt that flow based on the fact that your customer scheduled a meeting with you, and those kinds of things? So whatever I'm automating that is customer facing, I always try to incorporate the means to get to a human, right? Um, whether it be scheduling a link, whether it be a reply directly to their CSM, whatever that might be, I would encourage you to have that path to a human being as part of every kind of automation that you build out, no matter what that is. Um, I've built a lot of stuff that is telemetry related, right? So if you have indicators on various aspects of your product, and if let's say that a particularly important aspect of your product is seeing a drop off in engagement or a drop off in actions, those are things that you're going to want to automate some things around. And whether that is automating an alert for your CSM, or whether it's automating an in-app notification that with a bit of learning or something like that, that's entirely dependent on what your ecosystem of engagement model really looks like. But I really like to build um, proactive automations that have an impact, right? I don't want to do that for every corner of the product if things start dropping off, but especially for those like particularly sticky items, I think that's huge. I could go on and on, but I don't know if that's. Talk to me on LinkedIn. We can talk shop on that.
Cool, cool. All right, I think we can maybe sneak in one or two more.
Okay.
Here's one. Any advice on how to get internal buy-in for the pillars? For example, how can I get buy-in to make it a team company-wide goal, for like data cleanliness, etc., versus me one by one tackling these issues?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I mean, you got to look at it holistically, right? Why why are you focused on digital CS, right? Simon Sinek the crap out of it. So like, why are you really focused on building your digital maturity? I think you got to start with that kind of self-assessment of why is it that we're investing in these tools? Why is it that we're investing in digital CS? Your answers are probably going to be different, right? But probably it's going to revolve around some semblance of do more with less, build efficiencies with the existing team, use the tools you already have. Like that kind of stuff obviously is super, super critical. And so at that point, you start peeling back the layers, right? What do you need to be able to do this stuff effectively? And that's where something like the maturity assessment is going to help you uncover where the gaps are. If your gaps are in the data realm, then you're going to need to ask for data, and I guarantee you that other parts of the business are also going to benefit from those kinds of things. And so the last thing that I'll leave you with is I think it behooves everyone to go talk to executive leadership outside of your department. understand what their KPIs are, understand what their go gets are and what they need to go do. Then go talk to your peers in those same departments and understand what their go gets are. Because the things that you're doing in digital, because we are so cross functional, likely have a direct impact on what they are doing as well. And so it becomes kind of this no brainer where I'm going to work on this, it's going to help you in this way. And so you're going to gain that kind of cross functional, cross departmental support for the things that you're doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. With that, we're at the end of our session. Thank you so much, Alex. The recording of this session will be available early next week in our resource hub. All of you Summit attendees will be notified when that's live. And thank you again so much for the wonderful talk and for everyone's great engagement and questions.
Thanks, everybody. Nice to see all of you. Talk soon.